This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of multi-practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest is someone I can't wait for you to meet. He's a distinguished optometrist with a focus on advanced contact lens technology and ocular disease. He completed his residency in ocular disease at Ohio Eye Alliance and spent nearly a decade as a clinical optometrist at Cleveland Eye Clinic. He's one of only 10 optometrists in Ohio to hold the distinction of Diplomat of Cornea, Contact Lens, and Refractive Technologies. He's the owner of Infinity Eye Care. Please welcome Dr. Ryan McKinnis. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a fun conversation. And so, let's jump into it. What was the most important thing that helped you grow your empire?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll freely admit that when I started, I don't think I set out to form an empire, or at least it wasn't the words that I would choose for what I was doing. But the most important thing in my mind was this desire to do things differently than how I felt the healthcare forum was moving. We live in a world where we're seeing an increase in the number of patients that need to be seen, decreased reimbursement across the way and across the board from insurers. And so is there a way that we can turn back the clock a little bit and do patient care like we used to, where we don't rush? We spend a good deal of time with folks and make them feel important and make their care feel individualized. And so with that goal in mind, that's how we set out to sort of start Infinity Eye Care. And it'll be 4 years here tomorrow since we opened the doors. And we like to think that we're fighting the good fight.
Well, congratulations. And for those of you listening, it's January 2025. So give me some reference of how long. So it was right post COVID, or right middle of COVID, you opened up. So that must have been interesting.
Yeah. You know that I wouldn't recommend opening up in the middle of a global pandemic if you have a choice, but if you can survive that, you can probably survive just about anything.
Yeah. So your key factor for success sounds like delivering a certain level of care to your patients. Is that, am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah. So, in my previous iteration of practice, it was a good place to work. I certainly did not mind getting out of bed every day, but we were seeing upwards of 35 to some days 50 patients in a day. And that's a load. Even with all the tech help you can muster, that's an absolute grind. And after 9.5 years of that, you start to wonder, am I going to be able to do that for the next 25 or 30 years? Do I want to do that? It's a lot of wear and tear. And so, that was the background. That's what led us to try and do things a little bit differently. What also helped us was, my thrust of my practice being specialty contact lenses and advanced anterior segment disease. I do some things that a lot of others don't. And so whenever you have a little bit of a niche in the industry, it does allow you some flexibility in how you practice and how you want to structure your practice.
And currently, how many locations do you have?
2 locations. So the original one in January of 2021, we opened in Twinsburg, Ohio. And then 2 years after that, I purchased a practice from a retiring doctor up by Lake Erie in Willoughby, Ohio. And so I jokingly tell folks, they're like, why so soon? And I said, well, everybody needs a reason to drink. And so for mine, it was, let's try to do this a second time. It's been an educational experience. And I can talk to others about, what's better, whether you open cold or whether you buy someone's practice. And the answer is, a lot of it depends on your risk tolerance and also sort of your bend on how you want to structure your time, because each has its pros and cons.
And so what's something you ran into as you were growing from 1 to 2 locations? What's something you ran into that you didn't expect?
It was harder to get patients to adapt to buying a practice than it was when you open cold. Everybody anticipates as a cold start, you're going to have to get people through the door. And how in the world do you do that? and it can be slow. And there are weeks where, you've got 5 people scheduled for the entire week and you're just hoping and praying the phone rings. But that you can almost prepare yourself for that. That's anticipated. When you buy someone's practice, you kind of think that, okay, they'll at least give you a shot. They'll show up at least once and give you an opportunity to impress them. And what we found was that it's really hard to change habits. It's really hard to change expectations. And even though in your mind, you might be doing things in a way that's better or more technologically advanced, it's not always recognized by patients as being such. And so that was a harder slog, more of an uphill battle than I anticipated.
Can you say more about that? Like, what were some of the things that that caused that friction with the patient base when you started your second practice or bought your second practice?
Right. Yeah. That's a good question. To a large degree, it's financial. Everybody beats around it, but in almost every instance, most of the friction that occurs in optometry practices is around the retail element and because there's money involved. And so we had bought a practice that, frankly, had not kept up necessarily with its AR accounts. That had not kept up with its billing. Billing was sort of done in a haphazard way. And so when you come in a very methodical way and you start trying to do things, which in my mind properly by doing things by the book, and people start getting bills or they start seeing things be a little more regimented, they rebel against that a little bit. And, some consultants will tell you, that's fine. Let them leave. That's okay. You're not going to build your practice around them anyway. And while that might be true, it's certainly a bit of an adjustment and a hit to your ego whenever week after week you have a little bit of a fight on your hands.
Yeah. Yeah, that can be tough. I remember when we bought a couple practices, contact lens fitting fees, right, were being charged, and
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
like that's a big change for a lot of patients. It's like, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind telling you the fitting fee when we bought the place was $20.
oh wow,
That's what it was.
yeah,
And so obviously you're not going to be able to continue to do that and pay the bill, for what you just bought the practice for. And people are going to have an issue with that. And I get it. I mean, they've been going to one place for decades and things haven't changed. One of the other interesting things as I got to play junior psychologist was that practice skewed a little bit older, because your practice ages with you. As I'm now squarely in middle age, so are my patients. So, that practice was probably skewed 65 and over rather considerably. Folks in that age bracket really rebelled against change at all. It might have been better, but in their mind, it was worse because things had changed. And I had a number of folks who were rather upset. And it wasn't so much at us as their dentist had retired, their primary care physician had retired, their heart doctor had retired, and now their eye doctor retired. It was just one more change in their life. And it's almost like they short circuited. They just couldn't handle another change. Um, Contrast that with what I see in Twinsburg, which skews significantly younger. Change isn't viewed as a negative down there.
hmm.
We can change things all day long and no one seems to mind. So it was just a very interesting study in the human mind.
That's interesting. It's probably good lessons learned too, for acquiring a practice and the demographics and the patient base that's there. It's pretty good insight.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I just tell folks, first off, grant yourself some grace. You're not going to know the entire story and the whole picture when you buy these practices. You're going to do your darndest. I mean, you're going to study it and you're going to get consultants' opinions and you're going to dive into the books and have the accountants look and you'll think you're pretty solid. And truthfully, you probably are, meaning you're unlikely to go bankrupt if you do your due diligence, but it's probably going to be a little tougher than you would like it to be. And don't beat yourself up over that because I'm here to tell you that I don't know that you can avoid it. You just sort of have to have tough skin, buckle down, get through the first year or year and a half, and magically you start to see these things change. The folks that decide you're not all bad will stick around, and hopefully the ones that don't like it and leave can be replaced with new patients.
It's good insight. So, what made you want to grow? What made you want to expand it to? Besides that, you said you felt like drinking more,
Yeah, right.
enjoying some good beer or
Yeah,
some scotch,
yeah.
or you
Develop a
yeah,
love of bourbon. That
yeah,
was
there
it.
you
No,
go. Yeah,
no, there was this belief, and at the risk of sounding a bit egotistical, there was just a belief that we could do things better than what had been done. And right or wrong, that was sort of the impetus behind the growth. Well, we believe that, okay, if we can open something cold in a suburb of Cleveland, there's no reason why we couldn't take over a practice that was already established and grow that one as well. And so that was part of the thought process. The other part from a pragmatic standpoint was we were moving in closer and closer to an election year. Election year economics are really screwy. A practice that skews a little older has a little bit more medical billing to it. And so in my mind, even if the retail dried up a little bit or we entered into a recession, because you got to remember in 22 and 23, the money had dried up from the government, but we weren't quite sure with inflation going crazy what we were going to be pushed into. My thought was, can I get into a practice that's a little bit more medical and see a little bit more of that, so that way we have more consistency, even if the retail went haywire.
Interesting. Um, so you took it from a business strategy standpoint and a risk mitigation standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. Now, honestly, I don't know if it was right to look at it that way, because I will tell you that the previous practice owner did not bill as much medical as we would have expected. They were much quicker to bill IMED or VSP or another vision plan that might have been tacked on to a Medicare Advantage plan or something
Yeah,
like that. So I don't know necessarily that that worked out exactly the way that I thought it would, but that was the logic behind it, was how can I diversify some income streams so that way we're not all tied up in one cold start.
that makes sense. And so, you go from one, you go to two, uh,
Mhm.
and it's not like my experience was that it's not a linear increase in problems. It's like exponential. Do you have a
Yeah.
similar type of? Yeah, it's not like 1 + 1 = 2 is 1 + 1 = 4 in
Right.
terms of problems. Um,
Yeah.
and so right now, a lot of folks are facing challenges around staff costs going up, specifically
Mhm.
non-doctor payroll going up. Um, how do you deal with that?
Sure. Yeah, that is a tough one, and if someone else has the answer, I'm all ears. But non-doctor payroll is skyrocketing, and I don't necessarily blame the folks asking for the money, because they've been whacked the last few years with inflation and pressures in their own personal life. So I totally understand the calling for or the need for more money. The issue, of course, is how do you do that when vision care reimbursements and even medical insurance reimbursements are stagnant at best, and in some ways have gone backwards in the medical insurance world. It's very challenging. What we have tried to do is we've tried to scale it in such a way that everyone is cross trained and we need less overall employees. Um, when I had worked at the ophthalmology clinic, seeing gazillion patients in a week, I look back and I don't know how we made any money, honestly, because we had 3 technicians, 2 opticians, 3 front desk, then you got a scribe, and, knowing what reimbursements are today, I'm like, my goodness, I think we broke even on the best of days with all that staff there. Um, what we have tried to do instead is scale it such that the person who's in the optician can also cover the front desk. Someone in the front desk can also order contact lenses and can also dispense glasses. People at the offices can be interchanged. So, if someone calls out sick, we can move people around a little bit. I've been blessed with very flexible and competent staff, and we've really poured a lot into their training. Now, do I pay them more than what some people do? Yeah, I absolutely do. But the trade-off is that I feel like I would rather have lesser exceptional employees than having more employees who are mediocre.
Yeah, I think I've heard an old adage that an A player is not just double a B player; it's like 10x a B player. And a B player is like 2 or 3x a C player.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. That seems to be pretty true from what I've experienced as well. But yeah, it's finding those A players seem to help a lot.
It does, and I don't know that you can create A players. I think you can take somebody who has the natural potential and nurture that and train them up into it. But I don't know that you can take a C player and all of a sudden magically make them an A player in 36 months or something like that. I have found that honestly, it's more likely that those C players drag down the A and B players, then you can drag them up. And so one of the things that I've unfortunately come to grasp as I've become a practice owner is that the old adage of slow to hire and quick to fire probably has a lot of truth in it. Yeah.
Well, so let's touch on that a little bit. If your culture, your performance is key,
Mhm.
how do you fire fast, or how do you move on from folks? How do you recognize folks are they're either developable or hey, this is a C player and not going to be where we need for our company?
Right. Well, and the first rule that I've always followed is be very intentional and slow on the hiring process. We interview a lot. We cast a wide net. We do a phone screening first, and then we do bring more people in than most for in-person interviews because you really don't know how they're going to present themselves until you lay eyes on them. And then we often, for the final interview for the last employee or potential employee or two, we'll bring them in and have them shadow for a half day. They don't do anything, they're just there to observe, but that's a chance for us to see how they interact with others, including patients as well as staff. And it also gives them an opportunity to observe how the practice works for 3 or 4 hours. So that way, if we feel like it's not a match, we just don't move forward. Because once you move forward, now you open up a whole can of worms with employment law and all that good stuff. And my brother's the attorney in the family, and we still invite him to dinner and stuff like that for the holiday. So we don't exclude them. But when you have that in the family, you see all of the pitfalls that people get into and how nasty it can become. So we do our darndest to avoid it on the front end. After they're hired, if you feel like it's not working out or they're not developing properly, I find it easier to have those conversations sooner than later. And so we are very intentional about an evaluation at the 30, 60, 90-day mark. And these don't have to be real in depth. Usually it's a pretty informal sit down to have them explain to me how they think it's going, things they find that are working well and things they find that aren't. And usually at that stage, you kind of get a good read from someone as to whether they think they're going to make it. Uh, I'll tell you, sometimes these people almost want permission to quit.
Hmm.
Like they feel obligated, like they need to stick it out for you. And whenever you sit down with them and sort of explain, here's the shortcomings we see. Do you think this is for you? Because if you do, we're going to pour everything into you to try and get you there. But if you don't, it's better to do it now. And it's remarkable some of the responses you'll get.
Yeah, is there anything that comes to mind that surprised you? Maybe like, it's like, oh, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, yeah. Like the way I'm wired, and I think most people who are optometrists or healthcare professionals tend to be fairly type A. We're driven to some degree. We're motivated. Um, we don't view anything as a problem that we can't outwork. If we just had another half an hour, we'd find a solution.
Yeah.
And the rest of the population probably, thankfully, is not wired like that. So, um, we had a situation where we had to sit an employee down and we had to kind of put them on a performance improvement plan, saying, here are the things we need to do. We think you're capable of doing it, but we're going to meet again in the next 30 days. And if you haven't, then there's going to be some consequences there. But I believe in you. I think we know we can do that. And a day later, the employee called up and said, nah, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I didn't think it was anything that serious. You felt like you just needed a kick in the butt, so to say, and get them going. They just didn't have it in them for one reason or the other. And so those are just some of the experiences that surprise me sometimes. Just how people were wired. I've been involved in interviews for years and years, even at my old practice, and I still can't predict with any more than about 50% certainty how someone's going to work out.
I think world class is like 60%, right? At least that's what it used to be. Like
Right.
only the best companies in the world only get right like 60% of the time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Now we've tracked it over the years. We're right at 50%. So I said, man, you'd like to think you're better than that, but in reality, flip a coin. that seems to be where we're at.
yeah, that's funny. Well, actually, not funny, but I mean, even then, right? You do all that work on the front end to get to 50%. Like, imagine how bad it is if you don't do all that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not easy. And I hear people say, this generation doesn't want to work or, I can't find people. And, I can't speak to everybody's individual circumstance. What I find is not that the younger generation doesn't want to work. It's that how they're motivated and how they are how they communicate is wildly different. I'm only 41. I don't feel like I'm that old until I go to interview somebody in their 20s, and I feel like I have no idea of how to communicate to these folks. But once you figure them out, they work just as hard as anybody else will.
Yeah, that's good. So let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about where you see the future, and let's just brainstorm a little bit. I want to see how your mind works in terms of business growth.
Yeah.
If you had to like triple or quadruple the size of your business
Mhm.
over in the next couple of years, one, would you? And two, if you did, why, or why not? And if you did do it, how would you do it?
So if I were going to triple or quadruple my business, I would do it provided I did not have to triple and quadruple my HR headaches and staff. That's the caveat there. Um, I don't know that as we look into the future that primary eye care is going to be the ultimate driver of profitability. It pains me to say that because for the whole career of optometry, we've owned the world of refraction and eyewear.
Yeah.
And that's been what's driven the field forward for its entire lifespan. There are so many pressures right now, though, from whether it's online players, third party insurance companies, the upward pressures from employment costs, that I don't know that in 10 years we'll be sitting there saying having a 900 frame optical is the way to go.
Mm.
I question that. I know in my mind, the way that the business will probably grow is branching into more subspecialties. And so while I do a lot of the specialty contact lenses and things of that nature, it's probably more cost effective to expand with providers who do vision therapy
Mm.
or expand to dry eye specialists with IPLs and radio frequency. Perhaps partnering with a local ophthalmologist for cost sharing of staff. Somebody who's going to come in and do the cataract evals and see patients a couple days a week. Because let's not kid ourselves; those guys are getting hammered too.
Mm.
So a lot of people are in the same boat there. So I think we're going to see optometry sort of diversify and move away from strictly a primary care into more of a specialty mindset. Um, and I think some of the primary care stuff is going to be left by the wayside. It'll either be an afterthought that practices do just because you have to take care of the folks who are in your community, or it's going to be turfed to some of the more commercial practices that are out there. So that's the way my brain works. That's kind of how I foresee it. I've been married long enough to know I'm wrong sometimes, and so there is a chance that I'm totally off base, but that's my best guess.
Well, it's interesting because I think you kind of hit on the head with the. We've talked to a lot of guests, and similar to what you said, Ryan, they're talking about specialization. And that's a common theme that comes up is getting good at something,
Yeah.
whether it's dry eyes, whether doctor had neuro ophthalmology is one,
Right.
or neurooptometry,
Mhm.
and then another one had. Most folks have usually dry eye myopia control, the big ones right now. It's
Right.
common, but it's interesting
Yeah.
to see that you're right that this seems to be the trend for folks. And yes, they're still doing optical sales, but
Mhm.
they're starting to shift in terms of where they try to capture.
Well, one of the things that I hear from a lot of the younger generation of doctors, I mean, they're coming out with exponentially more debt than we did 10, 15 years ago. And at some point, there's going to be a tipping point that we hit where where is the income potential for these folks, and is it worth the debt? And I think that's coming. I think that's going to be something the schools of optometry are going to have to tackle in a big way. I don't know what the answer is. I just know that you're not going to be able to come out of school with $300,000 of debt, live in these cities that most of these young grads want to live in, and make enough money to put food on the table for a family and pay back your student loans.
Yeah.
There's just an economic reality to that. And so when I talk to these younger folks, one of the things I hear a lot about is burnout. And I think burnout's a legitimate concern. But when I talk to some other folks, I don't know that it's burnout so much as it is boredom. They get burned out on doing the same two and three things 25 times a day.
Yeah.
And by specializing, you don't have that. You know, every single day I've got something different coming in that is difficult with my specialty contact lens practice, but it's not difficult in a bad way. It's challenging, you know, it's rewarding economically, but it's also rewarding on a human level because you're changing people's lives in ways that they can't get that online. They can't go to 1-800 and do an online contact lens evaluation, which is a joke to begin with, because, you know, you're one of the few guys around who can fix their problem. And that combats the burnout for me because every day I've got a new challenge to look to. And I think that's why specialization will continue to happen because you you want to make a difference in people's lives. And while that used to be giving them a pair of glasses, now that's become so mainstream that there's other ways that you kind of have to seek out to find.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good insight because, like, I haven't heard that connection before. I really like that. That specialization also helps with just boredom, right? It's like refraction is pretty straightforward.
Right.
Not as exciting necessarily if you keep doing it for year in, year out.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you specialize, you get that variety, and a lot of doctors. You all go to what we see in the doctors that come into our offices. They, especially younger ones, they're very highly trained and skilled in terms of the medical side of the business. So
Sure.
they want it. They want more of that. So I think there's something there. That's actually really good insight. I like that.
Yeah.
Have
And you know, how do you measure how good at refractions are you? I mean, is it your remake rate? Is it how many people hug you at the end of an exam? I don't know,
yeah.
but it's really difficult to know whether you're really, really good at it because right when you think you are, you're going to have that hyperopic first time progressive wearer who's going to make you want to go beat your head off the wall. Like that's just the way it goes.
Yeah,
But
that's gonna be me in a couple of years. So
right. Yeah, we're all going there. Like we're all going
yeah,
to get there. Uh,
yeah.
but,
My wife, who's a
but
doctor, is not looking forward to it. It's like I'll be a plus on plus. So
right.
we'll see how that
But
goes.
you can measure yourself as a specialty. Like, there's always more stuff to learn. I know you and I had talked before. Bill Parcells, who was a football coach
Yeah,
for the New York Giants and later the Cowboys, said, every day you either get better or you get worse. You never stay the same. And the reason for that is if you think you stay the same, someone else worked harder than you that day and now they're better than you. And that can drive you nuts if you let it. But in reality, that drives me forward because every day I've got patients coming in who have significant challenges. So I have to be better than I was the day before so I can take care of them. And it motivates me.
yeah. Well, on that, let's jump in a little bit more about what makes you tick, Ryan. I'm
Yeah.
curious. I always like this question because it gives me there's always interesting stories. Um, can you share with us maybe one or two moments in your life that were really impactful that you felt like made you who you are today? It could have been kindergarten, could have been college, could have been last week. I don't know. Yeah. So can you think of one or two stories that really had an impact
Yeah.
on you?
Yeah. So, it's not so much of a story, but the reason I'm in healthcare is my high school biology teacher.
Yeah.
He was the first teacher that really showed me that science could be utilized to explain a lot of things and it could be used for good. When you're in school, you're always just trying to learn it so you can regurgitate it on a test and get your good grade and move on to the next. But he was the one that really kind of embedded that passion for moving forward in science. So, uh, Mr. Heck, if you're out there, we're really, you made a difference.
He made
Um,
me listen to his podcast. You never know.
the, uh, the one that made a difference on a personal level, was becoming a parent.
Okay.
We have 4 kids. Um, Having children does a lot of things, but one of the things it definitely does for you is it teaches you patience. And having patience has made me an infinitely better doctor, because there are just days where it's not going to go your way. There are times where you have to take a step back and listen and communicate differently than you otherwise would typically do. And I give a lot of credit to just the things that I've had to learn as a parent and how I've been able to apply those in my professional life.
Nice. Yeah, I know being a parent myself, it's, the reason I shaved my head is because I lost all of it after kids.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
This gray
like
was not here when the first kid showed up, but by
yeah,
the fourth one, yeah, it's
the
a
full yeah,
significant.
I hear you. So let's time travel a little bit.
Yep.
You had to go 4 days after you graduate OD school. What's the advice you'd give your younger self knowing what you know now?
If I was going to go back in time, I would tell that person to bet on yourself a little sooner than you feel comfortable.
Mm,
Uh, you,
mhm.
if you surround yourself with the right people, you can accomplish way more than what you think you can. And I held off opening my own practice for several years because I just didn't think I was a good enough business person, or that I had the requisite skill set to manage a business. It doesn't mean you have all the answers. And it's a humbling experience being a business owner because, there's a lot of issues that crop up that you don't feel qualified to handle, but you're qualified to handle way more than you think you are. And so if I had to go back in time, I would say, bet on yourself sooner than you ever thought you'd be able to.
That's good. That's good. I like that. It shows some confidence. So
Yeah. 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 What's the worst that could happen? Yes. I mean, there are people who open up businesses and they fail. They absolutely do. Unfortunately, I know some optometrists that happen too. Usually it's outside events though that push it more than anything else. For all of the time we spend complaining about optometry, it's still a really good field. And without sounding conceited, there's a lot of people out there who aren't very good at running a business who have been in business for a long time. So there's some wiggle room built into it.
yeah,
If you can take care of people, and if you have a modicum of an ability to run QuickBooks, I promise you can do this. The mental part is harder than the machinations of
yeah.
it.
No, I hear you. I tell people all the time. I'm not an optometrist myself. My wife is, but I love this business because it's such a cool business. It's you helping people. It's meaningful,
Yep.
and there's so many different levers you can pull on. And
Mhm.
it's healthcare, right? So there's an element of stability to it because people need healthcare. So it's
Right.
a fantastic business. I'm with you on
Yep.
that.
Yeah. One of the things I find fascinating is every ophthalmologist I've talked to over the years who has a son or daughter who's looking at healthcare, they tell them how great it is to be an optometrist,
Hmm, interesting.
because they're like, you don't want to be in surgery at 5:30 in the morning and be on your till 2 in the
You want that
afternoon.
lifestyle, yeah.
You're in med school forever. Like, it's just so much. You know who has it great? Those optometrists have it fantastic. And I'm like, man, I don't know that optometrists are as good of a cheerleader as some of the ophthalmologists that I that I've talked to about it. So,
What is
you
it?
know,
Grass sells greener, right? That's what
that's right.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think someone told me one time that it was like the grass is greenest where you water it, right? So
That's right. That is
yeah,
true.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, what do you do for fun? Like, what is it that you like to do, or hobbies, anything like that you want to share?
Yeah, yeah. So, big sports nut. And so, I grew up in Western PA. So, as is often the case, you're born into fandom of wherever you were born and raised. So, big Pittsburgh sports fan here. So, we spend a lot of time, yelling at the TV, during sports season. I have two sons, and so been able to pass that down. So, we'll watch just about anything that's on.
Okay,
Um, as the kids have gotten older, the hobbies become a little more sparse because you spend all your time chauffeuring and driving instead of doing it yourself. But I still get out and golf when I can. Try to take advantage of that from spring to fall here in Ohio when the weather
yeah,
isn't with 8 inches of snow and 20 degrees like it is right now. So uh, try and do that when I can. But one of the fun hobbies that I sort of tied into owning the business is I do a lot of travel hacking. And
oh
so if you spend a lot of money on things in the business, you might as well travel with all those credit card points you've racked up.
yeah,
So it's become a hobby of mine to take those points and turn them into swankier hotel stays and flights than we otherwise would ever be able to afford. And at least once a year, my wife and I somewhat jokingly call it our save the marriage trip. And we take a week away where it's just us two, and we live it up for a week.
nice.
And so that's become sort of like the yearly fun for me is how can I find a destination and spend as little money as possible getting us there?
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, yeah. The payoff's great too. So there's enough motivation to keep doing it year after year.
Well, good. So Western Pennsylvania. So you Ohio State or you Penn guy?
Yeah. So Penn
Or
State
neither. Penn
was,
State.
yeah. So I grew up north of Pittsburgh, but mostly Penn State fan. And so being here in Ohio, uh, I'm an outcast because everybody in Ohio thinks Ohio State invented the game of football, and so they certainly love their Buckeyes. Um, if they both win in the college football semifinals, it's going to be
Interesting.
an interesting event here around the neighborhood.
I didn't follow that close. Did they play this year?
They did. Ohio State beat them this year, but they're both in the semis and they're on opposite sides of the bracket. So if
It could
they,
happen again.
yeah, it could happen again. And I don't like my odds as a Penn State fan if they do meet again, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, it should be fun. So I'm looking forward to
Yeah,
seeing the game. So I have a
that's
dog
right.
in this fight. So,
Right.
Ryan, let's, where can folks connect with you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah. So my email is probably the easiest way to connect. I don't mind giving it to folks. I know it's always dangerous to send this out over the podcast space, but I trust your followers. So it's Ryan at infinityEyeCareOhio.com. That's the easiest way. The practice website's infinityEyeCareOhio.com, as you would expect. And so you can certainly send general inquiries through the practice's website as well. They all come through in the general email box, and I monitor that as well. And so if anybody has any questions or wants to know, how we went about it, or different folks that we used along the way, I'm happy to answer any and all questions.
Awesome. And we'll put those in the show notes for sure. And so, thank you again, Dr. McKinnis, for joining
Yeah,
us.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, a ton of fun. Love talking this stuff, and certainly if anybody is ever questioning whether to do it, I'm living proof you can and you can survive. So I really appreciate the chance to come on and speak with you about this. One of my favorite topics.
Yeah, I think we got a lot of good insights. I'm looking forward to seeing what folks think about the insights that you have. And thank you again, audience, for joining us. And if you learned anything, liked anything, laughed, please share and subscribe. And thank you again, Dr. McKinnis. This has been another great episode of Optometrists Building Empires, and we'll see you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, visit buildingempires.live. This show is proudly sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team was born out of staffing challenges my wife and I faced together, managing multiple optometry locations. We refined our approach at Classic Vision Care and now offer our expertise to others. If you're experiencing challenges with staffing and you'd like to set up a discovery call, we'd be happy to help you and connect you with the right resources. We'll see you next time.